Welcome to the first watercolor live stream on my YouTube. So the question is going to be how to paint portraits in watercolor. And what you see here are the watercolors. But we are going to start with a drawing. I've experimented with so many different approaches to this topic. And portraiture differentiates itself from basically everything else in the sense that it's very reliant on drawing. Now, with the other materials like oil paint and acrylic, pastel, you can get by without any kind of careful drawing at first. With watercolor, you don't need a super precise drawing, but I would suggest, and disclaimer, I am, well, let me preface this by saying I've been painting and drawing for 16 years, primarily with oil paint and charcoal and or graphite. Watercolor is new to me, in particular watercolor portrait. So call it a crutch, if you will, but starting with a drawing puts you in familiar territory if you are like me and you haven't been doing watercolor for that long. Hey May, welcome, welcome. So this is at a bit of a different day than you're used to, everybody. And remember I said that I would start incorporating watercolor into the mix on Tuesdays. But I was never really too specific about when, because I have been working on this stuff. The paper that I'm using is 100% cotton. It's this thing, fluid 100 watercolor paper, 8x10, 140 pounds, whatever that means, watercolor paper. When you're doing a drawing for watercolor with the intent, when you're doing a drawing with the intent to go over with watercolor, I would suggest you use a graphite as opposed to charcoal. The charcoal will tend to smear. Not that I did that, but I assume that it will smear. You also have those water-soluble pencils. This is just a regular pencil. And I don't intend to do a pretty heavy drawing. Just enough to get an idea of where the features are going to go in a general sense. But a lot of the drawing is actually going to be done with the paint. The model for today is actually not from the Billiard Academy. That I've been painting people from there, and I'll paint someone else from there next time. But this is from an art group. This model is from an art group in Baltimore. She's a MICA student. I think she said she's a senior at MICA. And she's posing for one of my art friends at a group that I have been trying to go to, although it's an hour plus long drive all the way from Northern Virginia. So cast shadow here. Shape for the lips. Placement of the lips. When you're drawing like this, know your tendencies. My tendency is to make the lips too low. So start off maybe by overdoing that a little bit, making the lips closer than you think, if that's your tendency. That's my tendency. And of course, if your tendency is the reverse, then do the reverse. And that's about as dark as I would want the outline to get. I don't want it to get any darker than that. Whether or not I will put the hand, I am not sure. I don't think I will. The hand is something that is something we can add later. cast shadow, hair, hat. Okay, why don't we get a little ambitious with this? This is a relatively new material, so it's probably not a good idea to be too ambitious, but whatever. Let's go ahead and draw the hand. First of all, the shoulder fits somewhere about here. And pointer fingers here. Thumb down here. A grouping of fingers goes here. If you are someone that tends to struggle with drawing, maybe give yourself more time than this. And that's going to be a quick drawing for the hands. Like I said, we can do a lot of correcting actually with paint as long as we work up to the light when we get into paint. Okay. Now we're going to go over a little bit of a operation in terms of kind of like your order of operations in math. I'm going to go raw sienna, yellow ochre, burnt umber. Raw sienna, yellow ochre, burnt umber. These are tubed watercolors, which some people don't like. Some people like the panned one. You actually can't even see where I'm going to put this. And you can use almost any palette you want. You can actually reactivate the watercolors on your palette like quite easily. So these tubes, this is some fancy Italian brand, by the way, I like more than the other ones that I have. So I only have one fancy grade watercolor, and I do notice a big difference between it and the other ones. And I know this is an off day, so a lot of you watching this as a pre-recorded are caught by surprise. But this has been a goal of mine to build up to this. With watercolor, I would suggest, everything I'm going to say is a suggestion because I'm relatively new to it, but I would suggest working from light to dark, building your darks first. So this is going to be kind of like an underpainting. And this is just a technique that I've been coming up with. I know it's going to look kind of slow and methodical, but I want to show you that you can actually get pretty specific with watercolor. See how I'm leaving the light? You cannot cross that boundary. If you cross that boundary, you can't get the light back. Remember, you don't have white in watercolor. You do have a white in the set of watercolors, but it's more like a gouache from what I've read. This is going to exponentially increase your acrylic skills in particular. And when you get into oil painting, this is going to exponentially increase your drawing with paint. Now her eye, I've kind of turned it on purpose. She's looking a little too far to the right. Oh, nice. Said, okay, Win, leave me alone. Not my birthday, but I'm glad it's not. I'm not trying to age anymore. Be very specific with this angle. So we're inking in the drawing here. Hey, Lisa. So very similar to how we did the acrylic. And actually the blending in terms of getting the subtleties and all that you can do really quickly actually through washes. But I don't want any of the white of the I don't want to cover it with a dark line there because you have to anticipate the layers that are going to be added to this. Now the background is fine because we're going to get into that. So you can put this outline here, or even if we don't, it'll be a nice vignette. So you got to be very precise here. That's going to be the word of the day, is precise. Once you lose the white of the canvas, it's gone. Okay, so now the nostril. You've got to be as precise as you can be. See angles for the cast shadow. Like I said, there's going to be room for corrections later. So this is more from the perspective of you know, a watercolor painter that is just getting into it, as opposed to someone that may have been doing watercolor for a long time. Eventually, you're going to develop a like an intuitive sense of how much water you need, the drying time, intentionally letting the paint lift. And that's fine because there's going to be white on top of that. Now, painting wise, I think from my experience, this is perhaps the most difficult because there's very little margin for error. Like I said, see, this is already a little bit long, even though I tried to make it shorter. So you can do something like this, go back into the line, make this thicker. Just by a little bit. See that? Not by very much. And this is going to be in preparation for all the washes, which are actually going to be quite specific, so there's not going to be too many washes here. Using the raw, what color is that actually? I keep forgetting. The raw sienna to draw. I don't want this to be too dark. Dark, but not too dark. And we'll actually be able to go into that even when it dries. We're going to be able to reactivate that. Analytics is punishing me for uploading at a weird time. I mean, weird day. But we'll slowly gain a following for these Tuesdays. So see how the lines weren't perfect here? But they were close enough. So the first part of this is really going to be more about drawing and what to do when you make a mistake like that. I crossed a line for the thumb. Now the thumb is too close to that finger, so I'm just going to have to leave it that way. It's still believable. It's almost kind of like a pen and ink. Am I confused? I thought today was Tuesday. Yeah, no, Wednesday is oil painting. So tomorrow, yeah, you're gonna have 4 streams this week. Assuming everything goes well, I'm having some troubles with my living situation. So now tomorrow is the oil painting. But I hope you'll still find this somewhat interesting. I mean, this is a large magnitude more difficult than oil painting. In my opinion, this is the ultimate. Other than, say, I think any tattoo artists in here, because I feel like tattoo would be the least forgiving. The most difficult probably be tattoo. Although I'm not going to be doing any live tattoo paintings, as I'm not a tattoo artist. But I feel like that would probably be the most difficult. I think that would be the most difficult. Alright, let's start adding some washes. Well, we already did there, but for the shadows. Hey, Libertas. You want the paint to be wet enough, but not dripping too much. It can drip somewhat, which gives a nice effect. If that makes any sense. You have to get a feel for how much water to use. And we're gonna layer this about 5 times, I think. We're about 5 layers each section. And it will lift. It will kind of buckle a little bit as we add more layers. And then it kind of evens itself out. But this is the 100% cotton, so it kind of gets back into shape. And we purposely covered that a little bit dark. And we're going to use a little bit of lift to bring it back, because it's not going to go back into the white. Cesar Santos does tattoos. I wouldn't put it past them. Okay, here's how we'll use the lift. See how I'm subtracting a little bit? So we're just using the water for this. And now we're going to use this to start to add washes. Like I said, you can go into it, but careful. See there? That was a borderline, almost dead execution of the highlight. See right there. Right there. That's your highlight. Don't lose that highlight. So see how we're reanimating the paint with the water? Be very careful not to lose that. That's your highlight. Up here, this is not a highlight, so we can just go and So we're just using the fluidity of the paint for this. Okay, so now I'll go into here. I use a line as a correction. Oh, you did a portrait. Yeah, I mean, if portrait's what you're comfortable with, it kind of makes sense. I would, if I had to do a tattoo, it'd probably be a portrait. It's just what I'm used to. So we're using this line to make the nose a little bit thinner. And we're going to let that be dark because we're going to go into the background with that anyway. So the objective here is to find, isolate, and maintain your highlights. Even here, there's a highlight there, and we don't want to lose that. Find, isolate, and maintain your highlights. And don't lose them because they won't come back. And because this process takes so long, by the time we do it and get on to the next stage, it's going to be dry enough to add more layers to it. So this process is, it could be faster than this, but I'm approaching with caution. And there are no highlights here, at least no bright highlights, so we can cover that. Some of the pencil shows through there, but that's not really a big deal. Highlight for the lips is going to be right about here. Right, the model is Madeline. She goes by Mad. She's an art student in the Maryland Institute College of Art, and she is pretty good watercolors. She told me to kind of prepare the paper by wetting it ahead of time, but I kind of didn't want to do that. So I've developed a way to build this without having to use that much water right away, though we will use quite a lot. So how's everyone doing today on this very unexpected Tuesday? Typically I'm playing pool right now. Um, I have a feeling the model's probably going to be really critical about the painting. This is, she said, I think she said this is her watercolor's her favorite. Okay. So remember I said we're gonna build from raw sienna, burnt umber. Actually, no, raw umber, yellow ochre, then burnt sienna. Yellow ochre is going to get a tad bit darker. Oh, that was a mistake. We're not getting that back. So this is going to be her necklace. And right here is going to be her hair. Yep, that's going to be her necklace. I left that alone on purpose. Now I'm going to add the yellow ochre. I know it's off camera, you can't see it. Odd that the yellow ochre gets darker. It's really odd, actually. It looks a lot lighter out of the tube. It's very odd that it gets darker. And I'm going to go over these warmer colors with the cooler ones, which is another concept that I've been figuring out with watercolor. It's kind of easier to start with the warmer tones, because what happens is the cooler ones, once they go brown blue, it's very difficult to warm them up again. So a lot of information thrown at you here. And I'm only going to use it for here and here. And then we're going to use the black, not the black, the burnt umber for the background. Again, these are washes, but they're a little bit on the thicker side. Okay, so that's good with that. Now we're going to add the burnt umber. And then we'll start to introduce another color in the shadow. Now burnt umber. And again, gotta be very precise. One mistake can cost you everything. Lower eyelid. Here's where we'll do the correction for the nose. Careful. Chop the nose off and it's gone. And just enough water. If you use too much, it'll drip into your lines. And you have to give up any concept of perfectionism here. Take what you get. Don't fight it, because you don't have white paint. That's why this is so difficult for portraiture. So we're on a quest, everyone. We're going to master all four: oil, acrylic, pastel, now watercolor. Hey, Jeanette. Oh, thanks. Yeah, the difficulty of watercolor, I know. Francisco. And here's a little trick. While we're still working on one little wash, this is actually still somewhat dry enough to start to do some extra things, adding accents. Remember, to me, it seems like working warmer to cooler is easier. So that's why I'm all right with going in with these darker accents with the burnt umber. That's why I chose this order. Took some water off the brush. If it dries like this, like a line, don't worry about it. You can reactivate it later down the line. Which is the difference between this and acrylics. Preserve your highlight. Find it, isolate it, and preserve it. Because once it's gone, it's gone. And yes, little shapes like that look unprofessional to the seasoned watercolorists, I know. But we're using a technique it's supposed to make the drawing the priority as opposed to the washiness of watercolor for a more realistic look. Just putting the accents in. We're multitasking. We're putting in the accents while we're adding these shapes. Okay, back to the burnt umber. Burnt umber wash. And this is the part where the paper will start to buckle a little bit. And you just kind of have to accept it. You can't be too much of a perfectionist. You know, that's not a perfect shape for the hand, but I'll have to accept it. Now you could go the extra mile and grid out your drawing, but I kind of don't like to do that. So that's why I didn't do that. Back to the burnt umber for the background. And yes, you could use a bigger brush for this. I'm just using this brush because it's just more convenient for me. You see, the paper is starting to do its thing. Now, it's not like I'm going to go right to this value now with the burnt umber. Remember, I said about 5 layers. I don't want to add too many. So this is going to actually get right close to the final color, final value once it's ready to accept more paint. Since we added some color, some values to the accents, those should be left alone for now. And what we're going to do is mix something fairly close now to the shadows. And now we're going to start to introduce some color. We have black and we have yellow ochre. Mix them together and you get a greenish color. So there's really not that many mixtures like you would do in oil paint or acrylic. It's more about your paint handling with respect to the water. So the paint mixtures are actually quite basic. It's worth it to know how much water you're using. And because this is white, this gives us a good idea of what value that's going to be. So if it's too dark, we'll just add more water to it. And then look at it and see this right there. That's pretty good. That's what I want. That's a way you can use the whites of the palette to gauge what you're going to put on the paper. And it's okay if it dries sharp because you can reactivate it. Really the challenge here is not to lose your highlights. So as a consequence, this exercise is actually really good for your drawing. Now, hopefully, that's ready to accept another layer. We won't really know until we try. So we're going to use the same mixture, but what we're going to do is add a little bit more paint to it. It's black, yellow, ochre. You adjust the value range by adding more or less water. Not by adding white, but by adding more or less water. Now we're going to work up towards the cool colors. More black makes it cooler. So that should be good. Now it's going to look too dark at first, but just trust the process. Reflected light is here, but what we're going to do is use the lift. I wonder if there are any water watercolorists here. Anyone that's used watercolor before? Go ahead, roast me if you want to, because I am relatively new to watercolor, so I won't take offense. We're leaving a gap here so that we can add a little bit more water and create a different value. This is what I call the lift. Just going to lift some paint off. Like that. So that's the lift. See that? Now I can create a gradation and change the color. So I'm restaining it kind of with like a red. This is what I call the lift. Take the lift off. This is something unique to the watercolors. It's a tad bit early to put in reflected lights, but I just kind of felt like it. Just because we can. Hey, Shavu. While we have this greenish color, we'll use it for some of the tones. Add a little bit of red to it to brown it out. The mixtures are really limited here. You use the water to create the gradations through washes. See how that's almost dripping? So we'll work our way up towards the brightest value here by using less and less paint and more water. But not so much that it's going to drip. See that? Now we have our little plane changes there. And here, we'll reactivate the paint. See that? Told you we could. Told you we could do that. Drawing correction now while we have the shadow. This goes further out to the left. And while we have this, we can add something for the eyebrows using that greenish color. Black and yellow. Just like the song that's stuck in your head. Don't worry about it if it's too sharp. You can reactivate it. So don't worry about it being too dark. You can always reactivate it. And don't worry about things like this. The tendency from an oil painting perspective or acrylic painting perspective is to just go right into it. But you gotta give these things time. This is what'll prevent you from having to use a fan or a hairdryer. A lot of people pull out a hairdryer for this, and I don't really like the sound of hairdryers. So now we can deal with this part here, and you're gonna have to anticipate how it's going to look. So you gotta plan a couple steps ahead. It has kind of a greenish tone here, so why not? We're gonna use green anyway at some point. So this is sap green. This is just the cheaper paints. I typically use them for the backgrounds. I know I've read there's a tendency for the cheaper watercolors to fade over time. So if you can afford it, just buy all the higher quality paints to start with if you have experience with the other materials. So if you have experience with oil paint, acrylic, say more than like a year, you can start off with the more expensive stuff. If you don't, then you would probably benefit from starting with the cheaper ones, just so you don't spend too much money right away. We're gonna put that wash down really quickly. It's green, but it's a warmer color than what we're gonna see added to it later. I'll just brown it out a little bit. We'll cheat it and put some of the textures while we can. For this hat. And I'll add some of this yellow ochre with water. Again, you're gonna develop a feel for how much water. It's hard to tell you exactly how much. See that? Just enough to get it to run across and create your highlights. So this has a little bit of still life in it, in the hat. The top of the hat has kind of a similar texture, but it's a tad bit cooler. So I'll mix the green and the yellow ochre. Thin out the paint. See what we get. It's alright. Darken it slightly. That's alright for our first little guesstimation for the hat. So really what we're going to do is start to isolate the white of the paper. Now with the black alone, we're going to thin it out slightly. That's why watercolor palettes have such small mixing spaces, because you really don't mix a lot. You create a lot of gradations through the water. I guess no worries. I'm taking this one rather slow. It is watercolor, so kind of dangerous if I make too many mistakes. Okay, so now we're gonna get the black. Add it to this mixture here. See how we can reactivate it? See that? You can see right through the palette. So we've reactivated it. Add some more burnt umber. And now we're gonna add close to what's gonna be the final layer for the hair. Remember, one mistake and it's all over, especially when it comes to the dark, so be careful that your arm doesn't go right out into the face. You could do that with pastel all day long and you'll be alright. Do that with acrylic, you'll be fine, just go back into it. Do that with oil paint, it might be alright, but not with watercolor. Gotta be careful. And don't worry about it looking sharp. You can reactivate it later. So very different, but similar in how you build values. Now see how, watch this, as I thin out the paint and create a value gradation here through a wash, as we're layering the cool onto the warm, you see now an interesting effect. We're able to control the color. So as we layer the cool onto the warm, we can adjust how cool we want it to be or how warm. We can make it warmer and lighter by adding less water or adding less paint. And you'll just see what I'm talking about. Okay, see that? So adding more water to it, I can make it warmer and lighter. Adding more paint, I can make it darker and cooler. Typically dark hair is warmer in the light. Typically, it depends. Someone could have dyed their hair. Okay, more paint, more water. Use the little streaks of paint here to create individual strands of hair, or the illusion of it. Preserve your highlight there. And we can always lift to get that highlight back. And don't worry about a sharp edge, as you can always reactivate it. Same stuff right above. Be careful though. One mistake and off with the forehead. And it's not coming back. So when Bob Ross says, don't make mistakes, only happy accidents. Make a mistake in watercolor portrait. I don't think there's a happy accident coming back from that. So allow yourself more, more creative freedom with watercolor than you would with, say, oil paint. Simply because, drawing mistakes are going to happen. And you just kind of have to ride them out. Don't give up. Okay, so now we've got these darks established. Now we need to go in with this dark before we start to add stuff in the skin tones. And just enough time to do that, I guess, because we've got a break coming up. So I'll use a bigger brush, not that much bigger, but it's a flat brush. And we're going to go with, say, a little bit of ultramarine blue, black, and maybe some sap green. But remember, the mixtures shouldn't be that complicated. I don't even like this brush. Never mind. Put it away. So let's mix it over here. Black, green, blue, water. More water than you think. Start at the top. Try it out first. Make sure nothing's lifting. Unintentionally lifting. You can lift on purpose. But if it starts to lift unintentionally, that's a problem. And yes, I know there's bigger brushes for this. I know. I know I've always needed to use bigger brushes, but I'm just not. Now more yellow ochre, blue, black. What I've noticed is that watercolors do sink in the darks in particular, especially as you use more water. So anticipate that they're going to sink in, which is an advantage because you don't have to be that accurate with this value yet. Be careful with this. You need almost surgeon-like hands to do this perfectly. And I can't do it perfectly. So just keep your hands as far back as you can. If you need to, if you got shaky hands, use a mole stick. And when you're going to take a break, when you're anticipating that you're going to take a break, right before you take a break, go in with bigger washes that are going to take a tad bit longer to settle. See how the paper is starting to buckle a little bit? Careful. Almost lost it there. You almost got to hold your breath when you get there. But it's kind of exhilarating when you do get it right. And why do this? Why would you do this if it's much harder? It's an easy question. You learn how to do this, your acrylic painting is going to be supercharged. I mean, supercharged. And of course, so will your oil painting. That's something I've figured out recently. Now, while we have this, accents. Okay. So while that settles, we'll go ahead and take a break. I want that to settle in because, like I said, this starts to buckle. Not that you can say it, but it starts to buckle a little bit. And then as we start to add more stuff here, all of us, for some reason, the paper tends to uh, get back to normal. I don't know why that is, but it just kind of does that. So we're going to go ahead and take a break. Hey, Susan. Welcome, welcome. We're going to take a break, which means the video of Hugo is going to play. Hopefully, not too many people are tired of Hugo. But yeah, I'll take a break and I'll be back in a couple minutes while this dries. Alrighty, we are back. As always, when we return from the stream, please let me know if the audio is working. And I appear to have missed a spot. Thumb is down here. As I said, you could do some drawing correction with paint as long as you're adding a darker value to the correction. But yeah, Giselle, yeah, definitely this does seem to elevate the other mediums that we use for sure. So while we have this blue-greenish color, we are going to take advantage of this and add the sclera. Start from the top on the sclera. This is not like any other material where you can just go wherever. You gotta be precise. Start from the top and use the paint itself. And by paint, I mean the water. Use the water, but not too much. This is my towel, which is off camera, okay? You see it? So take some of it off, but not a lot. You develop a feel for this. Drag it down. So this is kind of that bluish color. And we're rounding out the corner of the sclera. This is one of the first things you want to kill off. If there's a highlight in between the iris, the sclera, and the pupil, make sure to maintain it. So find it, maintain it. Find it, isolate it, protect it. Almost lost it, but it's still there. We were 1 millimeter away from, less than a millimeter away from losing it. Okay, I'm glad the audio is still working. Thank you, thank you. Now that we still have this greenish color, the model's eyes are kind of a greenish, yeah, I think kind of a greenish color. And we'll start to add that in. You gotta protect your highlights though. That's a highlight I want to protect. And the bottom there is supposed to be lighter, so I'm going to take some paint off with a little bit of water. H2O. Okay, there we go. That was risky. So it's always a little risky when you get into that stage. You gotta take a deep breath before you do it. And just go for it. A little bit of yellow ochre, a tad bit of red. Remember, there's not so much mixing here. But when you are mixing, try to keep it, say, I'm going from blue to green to just a tad bit of yellow and red. But the red actually won't brown it out as much as you think. A little more water so this flows. Maintain that highlight. You gotta be careful not to lose it. Oh, thanks, Cassell. Careful not to lose it. Adding more water. Pushing it off to the left to maintain that. Perfect. And now we're going to add the dark for the pupil on both of them. And the eyelash. Preserve your highlight. Gotta preserve that highlight. Now we can start to add the darks for the highlights. I'm going to add a little bit of a brownish tone. Still dark, but closer to the red. I find when I'm mixing with watercolor, I tend to spin. As opposed to with oil paint, I can just zigzag like this. I tend to spin. You add some side spin to the watercolor. Okay. Next order of operations is going to be with the skin. So we're going to add a very careful wash to it and maintain the highlight. This one, mainly these two, because we already saved the ones here and here and here. So some people do this with masking tape or something like, or masking, not masking tape, some kind of glue, masking fluid. I don't know. Somebody here knows what I'm talking about. I don't feel like it. Typically, I just kind of wing it. But maybe we can try that later. Clean it off, right? So pick a space, this one or that one. I'm gonna pick this one. So basically start from scratch. When you get into skin color, start off with a fresh section on your palette. You really don't need a lot of paint to do this. That's why when they sell the tubes of watercolor, they're pretty small. I was wondering why that was, but eventually I found out. Okay, so how do you get a skin tone with watercolor? Red and green with a tad bit of yellow ochre. You can see it somewhat right there on the palette. The red I'm using is called vermilion, but it's just a cheap red. I will upgrade them as I go. And the green is sap green. Add a little more yellow ochre. So as we add this wash, once we add this wash here and preserve that highlight, this is going to appear even darker. But do not try to paint from the dark out to the light. You can only work on the section that you're working on the light, because this is a whole different story. You actually want a dry layer on this, a couple dry layers on this before you go from here back out there. Okay, red, green, that's sap green, yellow ochre, more red. See how I'm going to move this mixture up to the top? This is why you need a clean section on your palette. So I'm shoveling it up here. And this is going to be the thicker paint, which we won't really use for anything except for maybe the lips. And then we're going to thin the paint off quite a lot. I mean a lot. This is going to be almost dripping. In fact, it probably should be dripping, so we'll see. Start at the forehead. See that? Almost no paint. And there you go. There's your skin tone. There's your skin tone. And we're going to do that starting on the dark section first. And here we're going to find our highlight, isolate it, protect it. More water. Now we're going to let this drip. Okay, so it's going to get lighter here. So less paint, more water. This is somewhat of a highlight. Not really a true highlight. This here is a highlight, so we need to protect it. But that one was the easiest to find because, I mean, it's right above the upper lip. More paint. Less water makes this darker. The water. Isolate, locate, isolate, protect. The highlight. Don't worry about too many value changes. Maybe 1 or 2 are fine. 1 or 2, as you see there. Don't get caught up in it. Around the cheek, you can add more and then push out from it. Which is a cheap and kind of easy way to create a gradation through a wash. This overlap is fine because that's going to get darker anyway. Now any white that doesn't need to be there, find it and cover it. Protect that highlight. Now we're going to give this a little bit of time to settle. Now we're going to cover the hand. So give that a little bit of time. So same mixture here. So highlights on the hand, find them, isolate them, protect them. Highlight on the knuckle here. This is not a highlight. This is a single highlight on the knuckle here, and there's only really like 3. So we found them. More water. Lots of pencil lines I probably should have erased. But, oh well. We're just getting started with watercolor. Future reference, erase them or use water mixable pencils. Appreciate all of you that are here watching this live, watching this as a pre-recorded, and are leaving a like. So as you see, no need for the whatever it is, the masking glue. And let's go ahead and mix kind of a dark brown for that while we have the skin color. But still leaving some of the skin color there. And I'll just use a thin wash here to put a cast shadow. Like I said, these will overlap, which is fine. We'll make that look darker. Same thing here, but that's going to settle in. Now with this little part of the triangle, use the water, the H2O. See that? That's what you can do with watercolor. A gradation done just with water. Highlight for the clavicle. Same thing here. Simple little edge. Now we're going to use that same skin color, which is reddish, but you thin it out with water so that it looks closer to a skin color. And you can use it for the lips. Remember to create a different value, just adjust the water. More water. Working our way up to the highlight. And you can reactivate this mixture for the background. Fix this. And that'll sink in as it dries. Okay, so here's how you do these. Remember I said you needed a couple layers here? You really do. So with the tubed paints, the tubed ones, you can get almost pretty much straight paint. Mix it with your little base here. Adjust the hue. This has to be a little bit cooler, so some green. And touch of water, but not that much. And you are going to overlap that. See that? Pretty close. You see it? So you're overlapping it and you're very close to the original shadow color. Now what you do is use the wash. See that? Use a little bit more water. More water. And you don't need to rush this because you can always reactivate the paint. More water. So now, pretty much straight water, almost. And this is going to create our gradation wash for the side plane of the face. But cover the entire side plane. That way you avoid any unwanted overlap. Now more water as we work our way up. And we're going to go back to the red. Kind of a brave touch here. And your washes, you always want to work out from it. Like that. To create your gradation. See that? So we're working out from it. With more water. Preserving some of the light on the top. It's going to look a little bit out of character at first. And there is an awkward stage with watercolor. It's usually about here. Slightly more green down here. So when you're putting in the beginning of a gradation, start with the dark and work your way out with more water to create the gradation value. And we'll go right back into this, remix this, and work our way back out. That's how you create your gradation. Just like this. Start with the darker part of it. Now use the water. Work your way out from it. And let that be your darkest part of that gradation. Work out from that wash. And that creates your little gradation there. Nice and simple. Just accept it. Whatever changes, whatever is different, you can't really fight it that much. But you can, if it's only a couple minutes in of a wash, use a lift, which I like to use like this. This adds paint into another plane. And you can use that water with the adjacent plane. See that? Can't ever get back to the white of the canvas, but you can use the lift. And as you're doing that, you can drag this paint over here And now we'll fill in this white using that same paint, because the white shouldn't be pure white anymore. And now as we have this water, we can use it to add this gradation. Now start from your darkest point and work out from there. Push the brush out from there to create a gradation. Once you understand that concept of starting with your dark portion of a plane and you work your way out from it, the shading is not that difficult. Right here is the darkest part. Use the water, work your way out, shovel it, kind of like you're shoveling snow, and it gets lighter. And that's your gradation there. See how ultra smooth that is? Now we can work our way into the highlight carefully. So again, any questions you have, let me know. Feel free to say hello. Comments help with the stream. Now this is still wet, so I'm experimenting with this. Do the same thing over here. I'm gonna use, why don't we use our original color, the raw sienna. That might be too warm. Add some green. Cassie, what's up? Welcome, welcome. Start with your darkest area. And use the water to work your way out. Don't use too much water. Just enough to do that. Get that to curve. I guess I'll, it's funny you asked that. They didn't even start. They were supposed to start yesterday. That's why I'm here. I kind of hope they don't start at all, but I mean, yeah, I'll write a post or something, but yeah, I'm kind of in trouble when it comes to that. Not like anything is my fault, but we're actually gonna have to move again. You know, it took me 2 years to adjust to this place. And now I have to move again. I'm not happy about it, but we do what we do. We live and we learn. Thanks, Kathy. Watercolor is difficult. Oh, thanks, Jeanette. Now we're gonna make these darks even darker now. Remember I said with watercolor you're working light to dark. So as these washes progress, the painting starts to get darker and darker. It's the opposite of oil paint where you go dark to light. But you go light to dark with the darks. So it's a little bit of a weird concept with watercolor. A little bit more burnt umber. Now we get to push these darks even darker again, including the sclera. But see how we gave the paper enough time? So nothing is doing anything weird. It's not like lifting in an odd way. I mean, this was on purpose. I lifted it that way. Start with the darkest point, and then with more water, you can control this wash, which creates a soft edge. I'm gonna add some blue to it. And remember, we started with kind of a burnt sienna anyway. Or a raw sienna. And work our way out from the dark. And add another dark for the eyebrows. As you can see, they're too light now. Start with the dark. Then with the water, you can create your gradations. Have it be a little lighter in the middle. Eyebrows typically make them lighter in the middle, then back darker towards the end. I can't really tell you why, they just look more naturalistic that way. Here's the water again for the gradation. Now we're gonna go with black. And our red. So really the only challenge, big challenge with watercolor is you have to be careful not to lose your highlights. As long as you're careful with how you layer, as in don't try to go from super dark to light because you can't do that. You go from light to dark. It's not so bad. But have a very careful hand because I almost went too far with that. So yeah, it does present some challenges. Like I said, these are good challenges though. We're using that pinkish color we started off the skin tones with. Adding some half tones to the fingers. Okay. Little half tones there, and of course a shadow. Now we're gonna go back here. Hopefully enough time has passed. We'll find out. We're going to remix the skin tone, but it's gonna be closer to the green. So red, sap green, yellow ochre. And let's see. Pretty good. So I'll use this to cover back here. And we want to quickly cover this shadow again. And add a tad bit of red while it's still wet, while it's still workable. I call these oil painting moments. Little moments when it starts to behave somewhat like oil paint. And watercolor has a similar phenomenon. So I'm going to go with the yellow ochre. Straight. Right to this. So watercolor pretty much straight out of the tube. And that's in order to create a really soft gradation. More water. And now we're going to push this out. This part's really time sensitive, but just be cautious to use as much as you can with the paint right here so that you can use a wash for this gradation. This is the toughest gradation in portraiture. For oil color, for acrylic, for everything. This right here is the boss level. But if you get it right, you get it right. If you get it wrong, just make sure it's not too dark. Like I said, it's time sensitive, so I'm going to go right in with more water and let it blend in. You need to know the planes of the face pretty well to do this. Now it's pretty much just the white. And just using the water, make sure that this stays ultra smooth. And just make sure it doesn't dry weird. It's still light enough here. I can still work with it, it's fine. But getting this gradation is what was important. Hey, Hansel Dog. How many watercolor portraits before this? Oh, a lot. Maybe like 10, 15 of them before doing this. Yeah, a lot of them. Let's add some blue. And because we use straight paint here, we're gonna mess around with it until it starts to lift. Once it starts to lift, then you gotta let it sit for some time. Now, obviously now this, once you cover it, you start to notice things that need to be adjusted. There you go, got that dark back. So I'm gonna keep messing with it till the paper tells me you need to give me a break. Once it starts to lift, that's when you give it a break. So pushing all of these darks. Something starts to lift. Once it starts to lift, then you give it a break. So I'm asking as much as I can from it. I think this is the first part that's starting to lift here. Yeah, that's the first one. It starts to lift. So that means once one little piece starts to lift, then the rest is going to get closer to lifting. So take advantage of this stage as much as you can, because once it starts to lift, you need to give it about a couple minutes before you keep working on it. So this is our goal, to master all four: oil, pastel, acrylic, and watercolor. Now more red. So gradations, pretty simple, just through the water. Now this is jumping out. It keeps jumping out. As you can see, it sinks in. And the paper is actually behaving kind of nice. It's not lifting that much. Now we can start to add some stuff here. We got 4 minutes till the second break. Here's where we can add kind of that kind of playful watercolorish stuff. Mostly water. green and blue. So what you would expect a watercolor to look like. These little playful washes. Eventually I'll learn how to do watercolor this way. Watercolor landscapes this way. You'll see some watercolor landscapes in the future. I'll probably do them plein air. Although that's asking too much to get Wi-Fi outside, but maybe at some point. Almost straight black. Okay. So now we're going to take a break. As usual with watercolor, you want to, if you're going to take a break, do something that you can let dry in between the time you take a break, or something you want to let break if you're trying to break something. But let's see. Pretty good actually. It's only lifting in some areas. Hardly any. Alright. So what can we do while letting this dry? The hand's a little too meh, a little too pale. I think we'll just let that be though. Yeah, it's just a hand. So I'm gonna add some of a pinkish color. So I'm gonna do this adjustment, then I'm gonna adjust the light sensitivity for you. And while I take a break, I'm actually gonna clean the water. That's something you want to do with watercolor for sure. Try to have the cleanest water you can. Okay. So, we are going to take a break. And we will return and finish this off. But before that, let's change the light sensitivity. Alrighty. So we will be right back. Alrighty, I'm back. As usual, let me know if the audio is working okay. And we should have given this enough time to be dry enough to continue to work on. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue this. And thank you so much, those of you that are here watching this live. Those of you watching this as a pre-recorded. Be careful when you're rounding out the sclera here. Thanks, May. I'm glad the audio's working. Now these are mini washes. Mini washes for the details. And remember, this was the spot that was lifting before. So that's the spot there. Still starting to lift a little bit, so gotta apply very little pressure there. Okay, so now we'll tint color for the cheeks a little bit. This part is kind of touchy, so less is more. Whatever you think you need to do, quarter it to 1/4 of what you think you need to do. Now this is one of those edges I was talking about. And we just barely got to the point where it doesn't lift. And it's okay if it looks a little bit lighter there. That's not going to bother. And this we're going to paint into later. So you add your plane changes kind of like one mini wash at a time. And we're going to leave that be for a while. But be quick to identify when something starts to lift like that. Another layer for the reflected light. So far so good, nothing's lifting. And now these layers are starting to have less water. Like I said, the darks do sink in if you use a lot of water. So let's see if we can work our way up towards this spot. And we covered it. Be careful with how much water you use at this point. Too much water and things will lift all over the place. I'm gonna add a tad bit of green. The green is for a little bit of variation in color. A little more of the pink. Now a tad bit of orange. So it's important to stress how important the paper is. They didn't talk about that much, but try to make sure you use 100% cotton. All that other stuff, like 150, whatever, 100 something press, it's a little beyond my expertise right now, but 100% cotton, just try to make sure you have 100% cotton. Back to the green. A yellow ochre and red. With a tad bit of green. Mixing more skin tone. I changed my mind. I'm gonna go back to the green. That's for color variation. So it's kind of experimental. So there's a tad bit too much orange throughout the face. So by using a tad bit of green. Hey Bruno. This is just for the sake of experiment. We're adding a green. Green wash. with each one of these watercolors, I tend to experiment with something. Something that would potentially ruin the painting. But I always try to experiment a little. Hey, Johnny. Yeah, the watercolor I like is something called Mamer Blue. I have a couple of the tubes listed in the description on Amazon, but the other tubes are this sap, or not sap, Artist Loft. I don't recommend these. I don't really like them. I just have them because I'm on a budget. But all my beginning sketches started out with this. The paper is also linked for you in case you want to buy the same paper. It's called Fluid 100, 100% cotton, 140 pound, whatever that means. Well, you can see my colors are not quite as accurate as that would be with oil paint or any of the other materials. So I do notice some problems with the cheaper paints. Meaning they kind of like fade, whereas the other one, the more expensive one, stays true. But you can still work with the cheaper ones. All you have to do is just add more layers like that. There's a 30s look. 30s. What kind of 30s? Are we talking about 1930s? 30-year-old, 2030s? I mean, she is wearing a hat that she was posed like this at the art group that I go to, that I used to go to and I've been trying to go to again in Baltimore. Quite a drive for me. I really like the ease of cleanup with watercolor too. It's really easy to clean up. I always come back to this sclera. A little more blue-green for the eyes. Hey, Elder, you wrote thoughts artists who paint random spots of face with accurate color. Yeah, that's something you could definitely do with another material. With watercolor, you really kind of have to layer it from light to dark. If you try to get the right color first try, sure, you can do that with something like a hat. I mean, but with a face, you're kind of drawing as you go. I think it puts too much pressure on the artist to try to get the right like color and value on a spot right away. I mean, that would be cool for a show, but in practicality, it's possible in oil paint or acrylic. But mediums such like pastel and watercolor, you really have to layer. I'm sure someone out there has done it with watercolor. Doubt it's ever been done with pastel. You would need like 1,000 different sticks of pastel to do that. And I prefer just letting it build naturally. Alder, I prefer if it's the right value, the right time first try, then so be it. But I prefer to build it like organically, like not have to force it, not have to be that precise right away. Oh, you thought it was an old master source? No, no, that's from a picture. Yeah, my artist teacher friend set that up. No, I didn't set this up. But she'd be really happy to know that it looks like that. That's what she tends to go after. So yeah, I prefer like a more natural approach where it's not right first try per se, but if it is, it is. As opposed to like it must be right at the first attempt. And it's hard to be that way when you're learning a new material, but the fundamentals are so ingrained in me that I can kind of think in terms of the fundamentals. It doesn't have to be so forced. Yep, of course, Elder. But it is tough to build up to the light. There's so much that can go wrong. Especially in that initial wash of skin color that we had. Okay, so now more specificity for the nose. And you can keep working on these for days. I have a Boo Girl that I worked on for like 4 days, I think. But it's the one that I posted on Instagram. We lost some of the highlight up there, but it's a noble sacrifice. I want to make this highlight the strongest. The first attempt? Oh, first watercolor attempt. Yeah, I gotta dig for it. It's somewhere over here. Let me let me dig for it. But first, I gotta make sure I get this layer. Careful with the highlight. Still there? Uh-oh. What's going on with my internet? That's not good. I see a red square. No red squares. Oh, okay. So you said yeah, it is a tough image to use for the first. Yeah, I would agree. Gotta dig for it. Uh, got a bunch of stuff here. So this is the first page. So this was like the very first little thing of wash, and then I did an eye with it, and I was using the white watercolor, and I used it on this. Yeah, these are the first few where I ended up using the white of the that they sell in the kit until I eventually figured out that the white was just not a good idea. And then I did this one, and then I think I ended up using some of the white like here again, and then I realized it's not a good idea at all. And then the other ones are on the wall, including the Bugara. I can't get those right now. Some of these are taped to each other, which is not a good thing. Um, yeah, these are taped to each other. Oops. Yeah, these were taped to each other. But then this was another one. Start to like get a little more comfortable. And this was like using just straight up that one color I told you about, the raw sienna with a little bit of burnt umber. Uh, and then another one I did of a singer that I might get copyrighted of, so I probably can't show it. And then I did one of Hugo. So the one of the singer I can't show. I don't want to get copyrighted. But yeah, a lot of attempts. Some of them made it to the walls. This was another one. I made up a face. Like, this is like a made up face where I was really like trying to just use the white of the paper. This is the cheap paper, by the way. You can see the texture. This is not what you want. You want the smooth paper. So definitely a learning curve with this, especially coming into it as a oil painter. If you come into this as a acrylic painter, you might have an easier time, but coming into this as a oil painter is difficult. But it's possible. It is certainly possible. And we're only going to get better with this, of course, as time goes by. Yeah, white watercolor is chalky and not transparent. It is. And the funniest thing is, the most hilarious thing is the one that I had was a sparkly one. So some of my colors to this day have glitter on them. This might have glitter on it though. I don't think it does. But yeah, some of them still have glitter. You're right. I probably should have chosen a simpler image for the first watercolor. But I don't know why I just decided to choose this one. I just like challenging myself, and in case I completely bomb it, then you'll be able to see the progression. Oh, thanks, Giselle. Yeah, I've been at it. I've done a couple figures too, but of course, I can't show those on the YouTube either. I think in the future I'm gonna buy one of those palettes that already have like the pans filled up to do like plein airs. These are so low maintenance, it's great. And unlike acrylic, if you leave your brush out, it'll be fine. You can reanimate the paint on the brush and clean it. But see, not once did we need a hair dryer. we were cutting it close with that edge, but it's okay. Probably should have started with a monochrome. Yeah, I had to start with the most difficult setup for watercolor. Don't know what I was thinking, but hope I didn't bomb it completely. But if I did, it's okay. You'll see my progression over time. Can't always be perfect. Yeah, these should be 3 hours also. Even though watercolor can be done a lot faster, they can. So that's gonna be 12 hours a week for you, for everybody. As Nelson Shanks would say, you can't make a major difference doing things in a minor way. Like I said, I got some issues with having to move out of this location after I finally got used to it. So now more than ever, I've got to fight to do more streams. But I enjoy doing them. It's relaxing for me. It's a great challenge. Again, think of it like kind of like a podcast. You can always mute me as well. Can't wait to get some watercolorists on these streams. Probably gonna roast me at first. Tell me I'm doing everything wrong. Lots of painting today. I spent 2 days working on a commission. Actually, now 3 days. 2.5 days working on a commission. For those of you that are still here, I'll show you the commission. In case anybody wants a pet portrait, I did a pet portrait. Let me find it on my browser, or I mean on my computer. I thought I would share this. Okay, it's too big. This is going to be an interesting time lapse of my first watercolor. I'll probably find this and edit it out. If not, it'll be kind of interesting. Yeah, so I spent 2.5 days working on this. This is a commission that I did for a fellow member of the Billiard Academy. So, John, if you're here, it was, as you know, quite a difficult week for me. It's still a difficult week, but we managed to do it. This is the painting for you. It's an 18 by 24. Been real busy, everybody. Trying to get as much work as I can done before I lose my studio. So that's the painting. 2.5 days. I feel like I have a broken rib from sitting down so much. Oh, thanks, Giselle. Thank you, thank you. Yeah, I'm probably gonna mess around with colored pencil at some point. I imagine kind of layering them like pastels, but with more, maybe like more expressiveness to it. Well, finally, we've got the message from the landlord. So she said they'll be here tomorrow from 1 to 3, which actually kind of works out for me because I stream at 4. Brianna, did you schedule that on purpose? Because that would be really awesome. Be interesting if she was watching this. One to three, that means I should be alright. We should be okay. Till I find another place to live. Take care, Hansel Dog, no worries. There's only about 3 minutes left. I think, no, 4 minutes. Either way, we'll still be here past that time, but take care and I'll see you tomorrow. Oh man. So tomorrow is the day. Tearing down the wall. Watercolor pens and markers too. Yeah, that might be kind of useful to draw. Or for certain effects. Giselle, if it were up to me, honestly, I actually like the area now. I made so many friends at the billiard academy, it'd be kind of hard to leave them. But honestly, it's not up to me. It's up to the wife. It was her choice to move. I did not want to move. But there you have it. Not my choice. So in case you're watching this, Brianna, it wasn't my choice to not renew. I mean, if I had it my way, I might actually stay here. If I could afford the rent on my own, I would just stay here. But I cannot. Okay. We get just a minute, a little less than a minute. Now let's go full opaque and cover this part that lifted. Full opaque. So in case anything lifts like this, just go full opaque over it. And it should be fine. The reflection, there's still a glimpse of it. And that's okay. We don't need a lot. But just for future reference, you can go into it full opaque. Like this. And it's a tad bit lighter, but not a lot. But yeah, you can go full opaque. Especially if you're going to work on it another day. Because that will take a while to dry. But there you have it. That is the first watercolor portrait that I've done here on YouTube. Very first, one of a kind. Everything's for sale. Anybody wants this, let me know. Now let's go ahead and sign it. While I sign it, this will be the point where I'll ask if there are any last minute questions. Signing with watercolor is super easy. It's one of the easiest things to do is sign. And that's the signature. We've got ourselves a finished painting. Of course, I could have done a lot more with the hair and so. But we will get faster and more efficient the more watercolor we do. So any last minute questions, let me know. Oh, thank you, thank you. Alright, so it looks like we don't have any last minute questions. Once again, thank you so much for watching. I wish you the very best, and I'll see you tomorrow.